laughed at, then feared. Our 1,000-year-old warship strikes again. The bridge section of the Phoenix tumbled through space. It was all that remained. A small piece of hull, maybe 20 meters across, with 15 people inside. The emergency batteries gave them air. Emergency lights gave them sight. But that was all. No engines, no weapons, no communication, just a bubble of life drifting in a graveyard. Captain Tai Han opened his eyes. His head hurt. Blood ran down his face from a cut on his forehead. He was still strapped into his command chair. Around him, his crew was slowly waking up. They were alive. Somehow, impossibly, they were alive. "Sound off," Taehan said, his voice hoarse. "Everyone report." "Jiren here," the commander groaned. "I think I broke my arm, but I'm alive." "Sung Kang alive. I can't feel my legs, but that might just be shock. Yuna breathing. My console is dead, though." "Daewoo. I'm okay. Bruised but functional." One by one, they all reported in. 15 people, all alive. It was a miracle. The bridge section had broken away from the main ship during the explosion. It had been thrown clear just before the reactor went critical. The emergency protocols had activated, sealing the section and maintaining life support. They had survived by pure luck. But now they were drifting. No power to move. No way to call for help. The emergency batteries would last maybe 6 hours. After that, they would freeze. Or suffocate. Or both. "Well," Sung Kang said with dark humor, "we survived the battle. Now we just have to survive the rescue." "Will anyone come?" asked Yuna quietly. "Does anyone even know we're alive?" That was the question. The evacuation pods had seen the Phoenix explode. As far as they knew, everyone on the bridge was dead. The Supreme Zenith was badly damaged. It might not have working sensors. They could drift here for days before anyone found them. Taihan unstrapped himself from his chair. He floated in the zero gravity to what remained of the communication console. It was smashed and sparking. But maybe, just maybe, there was something he could do. He had been a communications officer before he became a captain. He knew these systems. "Hey," he called out. "If you can move, I need you here. We're going to try to fix this comm system." Haewon pushed herself through the air to join him. Her engineering uniform was torn and burned. She had a nasty bruise on her face, but her hands were steady. "Sir, this console is destroyed. We'd need parts we don't have." "Then we improvise," Taehan said. "You taught Jinsol that the old ways meant fixing things with what you have. Show me." Together they worked. Taihan pulled wires. Haewon reconnected circuits. They used pieces of destroyed equipment to replace broken components. It was rough work. Dangerous work. One wrong connection could electrocute them or drain their precious battery power. But they were careful. Patient. After an hour, they had something. Not a working communication system, but a basic transmitter. It could send one signal. One message, then it would burn out. "We get one shot at this," Haewon said. "One broadcast, it won't be strong. Maybe a few 100,000 kilometers range, but if any ship is close enough, they'll hear it." Taehan nodded. He activated the transmitter. Static filled the air, then his voice weak and distorted. "This is Captain Taehan of the Phoenix. We have survivors. 15 people. Requesting immediate rescue. Our position." He read off the coordinates from Yuna's backup display. "We have 6 hours of life support remaining. Please respond." The transmission ended. The makeshift system sparked and died. Smoke rose from the console. That was it. Their one message sent into the void. Now all they could do was wait. Minutes passed. Then an hour. The crew sat quietly in the dim emergency lighting. They tried not to think about the air running out, about freezing to death, about dying so close to survival. Bo-min moved through the cramped space, checking on everyone's injuries. Jiren's arm was definitely broken. Sung Kang had a concussion. Daewoo had cracked ribs. Yuna was in shock. All of them had cuts and bruises, but they would live, if they were rescued in time. "I'm sorry I got you all killed," Taihan said quietly. "Sir, we're not dead yet," Jiren replied. "And even if we were, I'd make the same choice. We saved the Supreme Zenith. We saved 3,000 lives. That matters." Jinsol didn't get to make a choice, Taihan said. He was 19. He had his whole life ahead of him. Haiwan spoke up. "Sir, Jinsol knew what he signed up for when he requested assignment to the Phoenix. He wanted to serve on a real warship, one that actually fought. He got his wish. He died doing his duty. That means something." The others nodded. They had all lost friends over the years. It never got easier. But it was the price of service, the cost of protecting others. 2 hours passed, then 3. The air was getting thin. People started to breathe harder. The cold was seeping in too. The emergency heaters couldn't keep up with the void of space pressing in around them. They huddled together for warmth. "Tell me something," Yuna said to break the silence. "Why did you all stay on the Phoenix when you could have transferred to better ships?" It was a question they had all been asked before. Usually they gave simple answers. But now, facing death, they told the truth. Sung Kang spoke first. "I stayed because new ships don't have history. The Phoenix has fought 43 battles now, including this one. Every mark on her hull tells a story. Every repair shows survival. I wanted to be part of that story." Daewoo went next. "I stayed because the weapons on this ship are honest, point and shoot. No computers doing the aiming. No smart systems making decisions. Just me and the guns. I like that. I like knowing my skill matters." Heywan smiled. "I stayed because this ship needs me. The new vessels run themselves. They don't need a real engineer, just someone to watch the screens. The Phoenix needs someone who understands her, who can fix her when she breaks. I like being needed." Bo Min added her reason. "I stayed because the crew here is real. On new ships, people transfer all the time. No one stays long, no one builds relationships. Here, we're a family. We take care of each other. I'd rather die with family than live with strangers." Jiren looked at Taihan. "I stayed because of you, sir. You're the kind of captain who leads from the front, who shares the danger, who doesn't ask anyone to do something he wouldn't do himself. That's rare. That's worth following." Taihan felt tears in his eyes. He blinked them away. "I stayed on the Phoenix because no one else wanted her, because the Navy was going to decommission her. I couldn't let that happen. This ship has earned the right to die in battle, not in a scrapyard. I guess we're giving her that honor." They all laughed. It was dark humor, but it helped. They were going to die together, as a crew, as a family. There were worse ways to go. 4 hours passed. The air was very thin now. People were getting dizzy. Breathing was hard. Yuna had passed out. Bo Min checked her pulse and nodded, still alive. Just conserving oxygen by sleeping. Then, a sound. A distant rumble. Everyone who was still conscious looked up. Through the broken window they saw lights. Ships. Lots of ships. Coalition rescue vessels were swarming through the debris field. "They heard us," Taihan whispered. "They actually heard us." Haiwan laughed weakly. "Of course they did. We built that transmitter." It worked. The rescue ships approached quickly. They had been searching through the wreckage for hours, looking for survivors. When they had picked up the Phoenix's weak signal, every vessel in range had turned toward it. The Supreme Zenith had sent every functional rescue ship it had. The Krell sent theirs. Even the Rigelians diverted resources. The first ship to reach them was a Valorian rescue vessel. Ambassador Thex himself had come. He saw the tiny bridge section tumbling through space. He saw the survivors inside. He couldn't believe it. These humans had survived everything. The battle, the explosion, hours in a broken hull. They just refused to die. Rescue teams cut through what remained of the Phoenix's bridge. They carried the 15 survivors out carefully. Medical teams rushed them to emergency care. Every one of them would live. Some would need surgery, some would need physical therapy. but they would all survive. Taihan was the last one removed from the bridge section. Before he left, he touched the torn metal of his command chair one final time. "Thank you," he whispered to his ship. "You did good." The recovery took 2 weeks. During that time, the crew of the Phoenix stayed in medical on the Supreme Zenith. Ambassador Thex visited them every day. The proud Valorian warrior had changed. He was quiet now, respectful. He personally oversaw their care and made sure they had everything they needed. On the 10th day, he spoke with Taihan privately. "Captain, I owe you an apology. I mocked your ship. I called it a museum piece. I was wrong. Your vessel saved my ship, saved my crew, saved me. I am in your debt." Taihan shook his head. "No debt, Ambassador. We did our duty, nothing more." "It was more than duty," Thex insisted. "You disobeyed orders to come here. You charged into battle, knowing you might die. You fought with weapons everyone else had forgotten. You saved us all. That is more than duty. That is honor." 3 weeks after the battle, there was a ceremony at Unity's Gate, the same station where the Phoenix had been mocked. But now, everything was different. The assembly hall was packed. Every coalition representative attended. Every ship in the area sent delegates. The air tasted like metal and ash. Junho stood at the observation window of the Global Restoration Project headquarters, watching the orange sky slowly turn darker. It had been orange for 3 years now. Before that, it was gray. He barely remembered when it was blue. Another processing plant failed in Sector 7, Nari said behind him. Her voice was tired. Everyone's voice was tired these days. "That's the 3rd one this month." Junho turned away from the window. The conference room was filled with people from every nation on Earth. Scientists, military officers, politicians. All of them looked the same now, exhausted, desperate, running out of hope. "How long?" someone asked. It was always the same question. 6 months, Junho answered. "Maybe 8 if we're lucky. The atmosphere is breaking down faster than we can fix it. The oceans are dying. The plants can't produce enough oxygen anymore." The room fell silent. They all knew this was coming. They had known for years. But hearing it spoken out loud made it real. Yun, the military coordinator, stood up. He was a tall man with gray hair and scars on his hands from the resource wars. "We've sent the distress signals. 300 different messages, broadcast in every direction we could aim our satellites. Mathematical patterns, basic science, everything we could think of to show we're intelligent." "And?" Nari asked, though she already knew the answer. "Nothing. Not a single response in 8 months." Yuna, the chief medical officer, looked at the reports on her tablet. "The hospitals are full. Children are dying from respiratory failure. We're losing 10,000 people every day to the poisoned air. In 6 months," she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Junho walked back to the window. Somewhere out there, beyond the dying sky, the stars still shone. Humanity had always looked at those stars and dreamed. Now they looked at them and begged. "Keep sending the signals," he said quietly. "It's all we can do." 3 weeks later, everything changed. The radar stations detected them first. Ships. Massive ships appearing in orbit around Earth. Not human ships. The designs were wrong, too smooth, too perfect. They moved without any visible engines. Panic spread across the globe in minutes. After 8 months of silence, something had finally answered. But was it an answer to their prayers or something worse? Nari was rushed to the communications center. Her hands shook as she put on the headset. A message was coming through, translated into perfect Korean, English, Mandarin, Spanish, and dozens of other languages simultaneously. "People of Earth, we are the Veltharians. We received your distress signals. We are here to help." The voice was calm, almost musical. Nari closed her eyes and felt tears running down her face. They were tears of hope, the first real hope in years. "Please," she said into the microphone. "Please help us. We're dying." The Veltharian ships descended through the orange clouds. They were beautiful, made of a silver metal that seemed to glow from within. The largest ship landed in what used to be farmland outside the UN headquarters. The plants there were all dead now, the soil turned to dust. A doorway opened in the ship and they emerged. The Veltharians were tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. They wore simple white robes. Their leader stepped forward, and his voice came from a small device on his chest, translated into every language. "I am High Architect Thalen. We have studied your world. The damage is severe but not beyond repair. We can help you. Junho met them at the landing site. He fell to his knees and he wasn't ashamed. Why, he asked. Why would you help us? You don't know us. We have nothing to offer you. Thalen looked at him with those large dark eyes. We help because it is right. Every intelligent species deserves a chance to reach the stars. Your species has potential. You should not end this way. The Veltharians worked for 5 years. They brought machines that Junho couldn't begin to understand. Devices that cleaned the air, healed the oceans, and restored the soil. They taught human scientists the basic principles of their atmospheric technology, explaining concepts that would take humanity decades to fully understand. Yuna watched as sick children recovered in the hospitals. The orange sky slowly turned yellow, then gray, then finally blue again. She cried every time she saw that blue Nari worked with the Veltharians every day, learning about their culture, their history. They were an ancient race, thousands of years old. They had a law called the Prime Directive. Never interfere with other species. But they had broken that law for humanity. Why us? Nari asked Thalen one evening as they watched the sunset. It was golden now, beautiful the way sunsets should be. Because your species sent those messages, Thalen said. In them we heard not just desperation but determination. You fought until the very end. That deserves to be rewarded. Hyun offered them anything, land, resources, treaties, alliances. The Veltharians refused everything. They asked for nothing in return. Just survive, Thalen told them. Thrive, build, grow. Perhaps one day when you travel the stars our paths will cross again. 5 years after they arrived, the Veltharians prepared to leave. Earth was green again. The sky was blue. The oceans were full of life. Children played outside without masks. The planet was healing. A massive crowd gathered to watch them depart. Millions of people stood in silence as the silver ships rose into the sky. Hunyo was there, older now, his hair turning gray. Nari stood beside him, holding the hand of her young daughter. We can never repay this, Junho said. No, Nari agreed. But we can remember. We can make sure that every human being knows what they did for us. We can make sure we never forget this kindness. The ships climbed higher, breaking through the clouds. Before they vanished, one final message came through. In Thalen's calm voice, survive, thrive, perhaps one day. Our paths will cross again. Junho looked at the blue sky, at the world that had been given back to them. He made a promise then, one that he knew his children and grandchildren would keep. If we ever find someone who needs help, he said, someone dying and desperate like we were, we'll help them. We'll pay this forward. That's who we'll be. That's who we choose to be. Nari squeezed his hand. Around them, millions of people stood in the sunlight, breathing clean air, looking at a blue sky they thought they'd never see again. Humanity had been given a second chance. They would not waste it. They would not forget. The Veltharian ships vanished into the stars, but their gift remained. Not just a healed planet, but something more important. A lesson about kindness, about helping others for no reason except that it was right. That lesson would change everything. 40 years had passed since the Veltharians left. Hunyo was gone now, buried under a tree he had planted the day Earth's sky turned blue again. But his children carried his promise, and their children after them. Jiho stood in the control center of the Interstellar Advancement Initiative, watching numbers scroll across screens. He was Junho's grandson, and he had his grandfather's eyes, always looking forward, always dreaming. But unlike his grandfather, Jiho's dreams were within reach. The calculations are complete, Hana said, walking into the room with her tablet. She was smiling, which was rare for the chief engineer. The faster-than-light drive works. We've tested it 100 times. It's ready, Jiho felt his heart race. Humanity was about to take its first real step into the galaxy. Not just probes or slow colony ships, but actual faster-than-light travel. The technology the Veltharians had taught them, studied and improved over decades, had finally borne fruit. When can we launch? He asked. 3 months. Captain Taiyang and his crew are already training. Jiho walked to the window. Below, he could see the monument his grandfather had helped build. It was a massive structure of white stone, with words carved in every human language. The debt we can never repay, but will always try. Every child on Earth learned about the Day of Salvation. It was taught in every school, remembered in every home. The story of how humanity nearly died and how strangers from the stars saved them for no reason except kindness. That story had changed humanity forever. The resource wars had ended. Nations that once fought over water and land now worked together. The lesson the Veltharians had taught was simple but powerful. Help others, expect nothing back. That philosophy spread through every human culture, becoming the foundation of Earth's new society. 3 months later, the Remembrance launched from Earth orbit. It was humanity's first true starship. Built with technology humans had developed themselves, inspired by what the Veltharians had taught. Captain Taeyang sat in the command chair, his hands steady on the controls. "All systems ready," he said into the comm. "Engaging FTL drive in 10 seconds. Sumi, the xenosociologist, sat at her station checking her equipment one more time. Her job was to study alien cultures, to help humanity understand the species they would meet out there. She had trained for 15 years for this moment. The ship jumped, space twisted around them, and suddenly Earth was light years away. They had done it. Humanity had reached the stars. Over the next 20 years, human ships spread across the galaxy. They found dozens of alien species. Some were friendly, some were cautious, but none were hostile. Humanity approached each one with the same philosophy: respect, kindness, and open hands. The Taurans were the first species they met. They were small, furry creatures who lived on a desert world. They were suspicious at first. Their planet had been invaded before. But Taeyang and his crew showed them the recordings from Earth, showed them what the Veltharians had done. "We're not here to take anything," Taeyang explained through the translator. "We're here to trade, to learn, to be friends. If you need help, we'll help. That's what someone once did for us." The Taurans watched the videos of Earth's salvation, their large eyes growing wider. They had never heard of a species that helped for free. It confused them, but they decided to trust these strange humans. Trade agreements followed. Cultural exchanges. Human children learned about Tauran art and music. Tauran children learned about Earth's oceans and forests. 2 species became friends. It happened again with the Drenth, a species of aquatic beings, and again with the Morvans, who lived in crystal cities floating in their planet's upper atmosphere. Each time humanity told the same story. "We were saved by strangers. We're paying that forward." Word spread through the galaxy. The humans were different. They gave aid without demanding tribute. They shared technology without seeking control. They remembered kindness and tried to pass it on. Other species started calling them the grateful ones. It wasn't an insult. It was respect. Sumi became famous for her work on interspecies relations. She wrote books about how gratitude could be a foundation for galactic peace. Her most famous quote was carved into the hull of every human ship. "We were saved by those who owed us nothing. Now we save others who owe us nothing." This is the cycle of civilization. Not every encounter went perfectly. There were misunderstandings, cultural conflicts, trade disputes, but humanity approached each problem with patience and good faith. They had learned from their own near-death experience that survival required cooperation, not competition. Jiho, now an old man, visited the Space Academy where new explorers trained. He watched young cadets learning navigation, diplomacy, and first contact protocols. Every one of them wore a badge with the Veltharian symbol on it, a reminder of where humanity came from. "Do you think we've repaid the debt?" A young cadet asked him. Jiho smiled. "The debt can never be fully repaid. But that's not the point. The point is to keep trying forever. We help others because someone helped us, and maybe someday the species we help will help someone else. That's how you change a galaxy." Every human ship carried a special beacon. It broadcast a message in the Veltharian language, a message that repeated endlessly as they traveled through space. "Thank you. We remember. We will never forget." Hana, now retired, lived to see humanity establish diplomatic relations with 43 different species. She watched as humans built space stations where different aliens lived and worked together. She watched as human medicine saved millions of alien lives, as human technology was shared freely, as human diplomacy prevented wars. On her last day, her great-granddaughter visited her. "Great-grandmother," the girl asked, "why do we do all this? Why do we help so much?" Hana pointed to the blue earth visible through the window. "Because once our sky was orange and we were dying, and strangers saved us for no reason except it was right. We're just doing what they taught us." Taeyang made his last voyage at age 70. The Remembrance had been upgraded and repaired dozens of times, but it was still the same ship that made humanity's first jump. He took it out one more time into deep space, further than any human had gone. They found a planet there, barely touched, with purple oceans and green skies. It was beautiful. Taeyang planted a flag, not claiming the planet but leaving a message for anyone who might find it. The message was simple. Humanity was here. We came in peace. We offer friendship. If you need help, call us. We will come. He included coordinates to Earth and a database of human culture, music, art, science, history, and most important, the story of the Veltharians and what they did. When Taeyang returned to Earth, millions of people celebrated. Not because he had conquered new worlds, but because he had extended humanity's hand of friendship further than ever before. In the capital city, a new wing was added to the monument. It showed the names of every species humanity had helped. Taurans, who received medical supplies during a plague. Drenth, whose cities were rebuilt after a tsunami. Morvans, who received food during a famine. The list grew longer every year. And every year, on the anniversary of the Day of Salvation, every human stopped what they were doing. They looked up at the sky and said the same words. Thank you, Veltharians. We remember. Humanity had become more than survivors. They had become helpers, teachers, friends to dozens of species. They had turned their salvation into a mission, spread kindness as far as they could reach. The galaxy was slowly changing because of it. Other species watched the humans and started to wonder. Maybe cooperation was better than competition. Maybe helping others made everyone stronger. It was a golden age built on the foundation of one simple act of kindness from long ago. And humanity never forgot where it all began. The human fleet arrived in Veltharian space and immediately understood why the Empire had fallen. The Krell were everywhere. Thousands of black ships, geometric and cold, moving in perfect formation like a school of predatory fish. My God. Doyen whispered from the bridge of his flagship. There's so many. Before he could give orders, the Krell attacked. They moved with machine precision, targeting the largest human ships first. Their weapons cut through shields like paper. The first wave of human ships died in minutes. Return fire, Doyen shouted. All ships, evasive maneuvers. The battle was chaos. Human ships scattered, trying to avoid the methodical Krell assault. Weapons fired in every direction. Ships exploded in bright flashes. In the first hour, humanity lost 300 vessels, but they had come too far to retreat. Doyen broadcast to all ships, remember why we're here. Find the Veltharians. Protect them. Hyejin was the tactical officer on Doyun's ship. She was young, brilliant, and terrified. She watched the battle data scroll across her screens, trying to find patterns in the Krell's movements. There had to be a weakness. Everything had a weakness. They're too perfect, she muttered. They move exactly according to optimal tactics. They always take the most efficient approach. How does that help us? Doyen asked, dodging debris from a destroyed ship. I'm not sure yet. Let me think. The battle raged for 3 days straight. Human ships were dying by the dozens, but they refused to leave. They fought with everything they had, buying time to search for Veltharian survivors. On the 4th day, they found the first outpost. It was a small colony on a frozen moon, surrounded by damaged defensive satellites. Fewer than 10,000 Veltharians were trapped there, with Krell ships closing in. Kangmin led a fighter wing to break through the Krell blockade. He was one of humanity's best pilots, trained in maneuvers that no sane person would attempt. His ships dove into the swarm of Krell vessels like arrows into a storm. Phoenix Wing, follow my lead, he shouted. We're getting them out. They lost half their ships breaking through, but they reached the outpost. Transport vessels evacuated the Veltharians while Kangmin's remaining fighters held off the Krell. When the last transport was clear, Kangmin received the retreat order. Negative, he responded. I'm going after their command ship. My fuel cells are damaged anyway. I wouldn't make it back. Kangmin, no, his wingman shouted. Tell Earth we paid the debt, Kangmin said. His voice was calm, peaceful. Tell the Veltharians they were worth it. He aimed his fighter at the largest Krell ship and pushed his engines to maximum. The explosion destroyed the command vessel and 20 surrounding ships. The Krell formation faltered for the first time. More human pilots volunteered for similar missions. They called themselves debt payers. They flew one-way missions, destroying high-value Krell targets at the cost of their own lives. Every day, dozens of humans volunteered. The Veltharians watched in horror and confusion. They had rescued 10,000 of their people from the frozen moon. Those survivors were brought aboard human ships, given food, medicine, and safety. One of them was High Architect Thalen. He was older now. His blue skin faded to almost white. He had been leading the defense of the outpost, expecting to die there. Instead, humans had saved him. Why? He asked Doyon when they met. Why are you dying for us? This makes no sense. You should run. You should save yourselves. Doyon smiled sadly. You saved us once, remember? You didn't have to. You did it because it was right. We're just doing what you taught us. Thalen's large eyes filled with tears. It was the first time a Veltharian had cried in recorded history. We saved you because it was logical, efficient. You save us because you love us? Yes, Doyon said simply. We do. The concept shook Thalen to his core. The Veltharians had always been logical, rational. They had saved humanity out of a sense of moral duty, not emotion, but humans were dying by the thousands for people they had never met, out of pure gratitude and love. Hyejin finally found the pattern she was looking for. She burst into Doyon's office, her eyes wild with excitement and fear. I know their weakness. The Krell are purely logical. They calculate optimal strategies and execute them perfectly, but they can't predict irrational behavior. Explain, Doyon said. They expect enemies to preserve themselves. Every calculation they make assumes we'll try to minimize our losses. But we're not. We're sacrificing ourselves, and it's breaking their predictive algorithms. When Kangmin flew into that command ship, the Krell didn't see it coming because no logical species would do that. Doyon understood immediately. We need to be more irrational, more unpredictable, more human. They changed tactics completely. Human ships started using strategies that made no tactical sense. False retreats that turned into ambushes. Suicide runs that were actually decoys. Feints in every direction. The Krell's perfect calculations became useless against human unpredictability. But it was still costing everything. 30 million humans died over the next 3 years. 30 million people who left families behind, who had lives and dreams, who chose to die for aliens they barely knew. Gina was the medical commander on one of the hospital ships. She treated wounded humans and Veltharians side by side. She watched soldiers say goodbye to their families over video calls, knowing they were heading back into battle to die. Does it hurt? A young Veltharian asked her one day. His name was Varen, and he had lost his entire family to the Krell. Knowing that so many of your people are dying for us? Yes, Gina said honestly. It hurts terribly, but it would hurt more to abandon you. That's not who we are anymore. As the war dragged on, something unexpected happened. The Veltharians began to change. Watching humans sacrifice themselves sparked something that had been dormant in their species. They started fighting with a passion they had never felt before. Not logical, calculated warfare, but desperate emotional defense of the humans who defended them. Thalen joined the War Council, working alongside human commanders. He suggested modifications to Veltharian technology that made no logical sense, but might give them an advantage. He was learning to think like a human, with heart instead of just mind. The turning point came in the 3rd year. Hyejin designed a final operation, one that would either end the war or end humanity's involvement in it. They would strike at the Krell Central Processing Node, the giant structure that coordinated all Krell ships in the region. It was a suicide mission. Everyone who went would die, but if they succeeded, the Krell coordination would collapse, giving the scattered Veltharian and human survivors a chance to escape. 5,000 volunteers stepped forward. They flew toward the processing node in a massive final assault. The Krell threw everything at them, destroying 90% of the human ships, but a few got through. The explosions were visible from light years away. The processing node shattered, and with it the Krell's perfect coordination. Their ships faltered, confused, unable to function without central commands. Human and Veltharian forces, seeing their chance, struck back with everything they had left. The remaining Krell ships, unable to adapt without their processing node, were destroyed or forced to retreat. After 3 years of hell, the war was over. Humanity had won, but the cost was staggering. 30 million humans dead, entire fleets destroyed, generations of soldiers lost. On Earth, families mourned. Monuments were built with 30 million names carved in stone. Children grew up without parents. Spouses grew old alone. The price of gratitude had been paid in blood and tears, but the Veltharians survived. Less than 1 million of them, but alive. Saved by a species that had every reason to run but chose to stand and fight. Thalen stood in the ruins of a human ship, looking at the bodies of soldiers who had died protecting his people. He knelt among them and wept. The Veltharians had learned to cry, learned to feel, learned that sometimes logic wasn't enough. "We will never forget this," he said to Doyen. "Never. Your species gave everything for us. How do we repay this?" Doyen smiled sadly, thinking of all the friends he had lost. "You don't, you pay it forward. You become the kind of people who would do this for someone else. That's how you honor them." The impossible war was won, but everything had changed. Both species were transformed by what had happened, bound together by sacrifice and love in a way the galaxy had never seen. The war ended, but the work of rebuilding had just begun. The Veltharians had no homeworld anymore. The Krell had destroyed it completely, turning it into floating debris and dust. Less than 1,000,000 Veltharians remained scattered and traumatized. Doyen, now considered a hero across human space, oversaw the reconstruction effort. Human ships transported Veltharians to safe worlds. Human builders helped construct new cities. Human farmers taught Veltharians how to grow crops on their new colony planets. "You don't have to do this," Thalen told Doyen one day. They stood on a cliff overlooking a Veltharian settlement being built on a peaceful green world. "You've already given so much. 30 million of your people died for us. That's exactly why we have to do this," Doyen said. "Those 30 million died so you could live. We need to make sure their sacrifice meant something." The Veltharians struggled with guilt. They had been saved twice now by the same species. First their planet, now their entire civilization. How could such a debt ever be repaid? But something more profound was happening. The Veltharians were changing in ways they never expected. Thalen noticed it first. His people were experiencing emotions they had never felt before. Not just gratitude, but love, grief, joy, anger. Watching humans die for them had awakened something dormant in their species. "We spent thousands of years perfecting logic," Thalen told the remaining Veltharian leaders. "But we were missing something. Humans showed us what. Emotions aren't weakness. They're strength. They give life meaning." Young Veltharians especially embraced this change. They learned to laugh, to cry, to feel deeply. They formed friendships with humans based not on logic but on genuine affection. The two species became intertwined in ways neither had planned. Sora was a young human ambassador assigned to the new Veltharian worlds. She was only 25, but she had a gift for bringing people together. She organized cultural exchanges, joint festivals, and shared projects. Humans and Veltharians started to think of each other as family. But the changes rippled far beyond these two species. News of what humanity had done spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Every species that humanity had befriended heard the story. They learned how humans had sacrificed 30 million lives to save the Veltharians. The numbers were staggering, incomprehensible. The Taurans, the first species humanity had befriended, held a planetary day of mourning. They had never heard of such sacrifice. Their leaders broadcast a message to Earth. "We thought we understood humans. We didn't. You're not just grateful. You're magnificent." The Drenth created monuments in their underwater cities carved from coral, depicting human ships fighting the Krell. They taught their children that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but doing what was right despite the cost. The Morvans, who lived in floating crystal cities, created artwork showing the human fleet arriving to save the Veltharians. They called it "The Day Logic Learned to Cry." Dozens of species that had remained neutral or isolationist began to reconsider their positions. If a young species like humanity would die for their saviors, what did that say about civilizations that refused to help anyone? 3 years after the war ended, an unprecedented meeting was called. Representatives from 47 different species gathered on a neutral space station. It was the largest gathering of alien civilizations in recorded history. The topic: creating a new galactic community based on mutual aid and cooperation. Sora represented humanity at the conference. She was nervous, surrounded by beings she had only seen in videos. Some were massive, some tiny. Some breathed oxygen, others methane. Some had tentacles, others wings. But they all had one thing in common. They had heard what humanity did. "Why did you do it?" A Drenth elder asked her directly. "Your species barely survives a century. 30 million lives represents a significant portion of your population. Why sacrifice so much for another species?" Sora thought carefully before answering. "Because someone once did it for us. The Veltharians saved us when we were dying, expecting nothing back. They taught us that kindness doesn't need a reason." We just tried to live up to that lesson. But you knew you might lose, a Morven representative said. Your chances of victory were small. Logic said you should preserve your species. Logic said a lot of things, Sora replied. But our hearts said something different. Our hearts said that a universe where we let our saviors die wasn't worth living in, so we chose to try, whatever the cost. Silence filled the chamber. Then, one by one, species that had been neutral for thousands of years began to speak. They talked about isolationism, about preserving their own interests first, about the logical reasons for staying separate, and then they talked about changing those policies. The conference lasted 2 months. The result was the Reciprocity Doctrine, a new framework for galactic civilization. Species would help each other, not for profit or control, but because it was right. Trade would be fair. Technology would be shared. When a species faced disaster, others would respond. It wasn't perfect. There were disagreements, loopholes, species that refused to join. But it was a start. A fundamental shift in how the galaxy operated, inspired by humanity's refusal to let gratitude die. Thalen proposed something even more unprecedented, a formal alliance between Veltharians and humans, based not on political convenience but on emotional bonds, 2 species becoming one family. We saved you physically, Thalen said to the human delegation. You saved us spiritually. Before we existed. Now we live. The difference is everything. The Veltharian-Human Concordat was signed 5 years after the war ended. It was a treaty unlike any other in galactic history. It spoke of friendship, love, and shared sacrifice. It promised that both species would stand together, forever. On the Veltharian capital world, the new one, built with human help, they constructed a memorial. It was a massive structure of living crystal that changed colors with the light. 30 million human names were carved into it, each one unique, each one remembered. The inscription read, in both Veltharian and human languages, they owed us nothing. They gave us everything. We will never forget. Junho III, great-grandson of the original Junho, attended the memorial's dedication. He was only 30 years old, a scientist like his great-grandfather, but he carried the family legacy. He brought his young daughter Mireille, who was 5. Great-grandfather Junho would be proud, Thalen said, standing beside them. He was very old now, his movements slow, but his eyes were bright. He promised humanity would pay forward our kindness. He never imagined it would be like this. Neither did you, I think, Junho III said with a smile. No, Thalen admitted. We saved you because it was efficient, logical. You saved us because you loved us. The galaxy is learning that love is more powerful than logic. Mireille tugged on her father's hand, looking at the endless names carved in crystal. Did all these people die? She asked. Yes, Junho III said gently. Why? He knelt beside her, the way his great-grandfather once did when explaining the orange sky. Because someone needed help. And sometimes helping others costs everything, but we do it anyway because that's what makes us human. That's what makes us good. The memorial became a pilgrimage site. Humans and Veltharians visited by the millions. Other species came too to see the physical proof of what sacrifice looked like. Some wept. Others stood in silent contemplation. All left changed. 10 years after the war, Admiral Doyen was old and retired. He lived quietly on Earth, tending a garden. But he still received messages from across the galaxy. Ships broadcasting thanks. Species saying they had helped others, inspired by humanity's example. One day, Sora visited him. She was a senior ambassador now, respected across dozens of worlds. Admiral, I have news. The Taurans encountered a dying civilization in their sector. Pre-FTL species facing ecological collapse. Doyen's heart raced. It sounded familiar. The Taurans remembered Earth's story, Sora continued. They remembered what the Veltharians did for you, and what you did for them. So they helped. They saved an entire species, expecting nothing in return. Doyun felt tears running down his face. It's spreading. It's spreading, Sora confirmed. 3 other species have done the same. The Drenth, the Morvans, and even the Kral, they were isolationists for centuries. They all cited humanity's example. The cycle is continuing. That evening, Doyen stood in his garden looking at the stars. Somewhere out there, the 30 million who died were being honored in the best way possible, not with statues or speeches, but with actions. Species helping other species. Kindness flowing across the galaxy like a wave. 15 years after the war, another distress signal was detected. an unknown species, facing invasion by hostile forces calling desperately for aid. The signal reached dozens of worlds simultaneously. Within hours, ships began to mobilize. Human ships, Veltharian ships, Tor and Drenth Morvan ships, dozens of species all moving toward the distress call without hesitation. Sora, now commanding a diplomatic vessel, broadcast to the fleet. Another species needs help. Who's with me? The responses came from every ship, every species, in dozens of languages. We're coming, hold on. We're coming. The fleet jumped toward the unknown species, ready to fight, ready to sacrifice if necessary. The galaxy had learned humanity's lesson. Some debts can never be repaid, but they can be passed forward, forever.